The total universe, the cosmos, not some isolated locality within it.
So the question is, how does time unfold in this cosmic frame of reference? How is it recorded?
To understand that, we must first define what a clock really is.
Quite simply, a clock is anything that repeats itself periodically and where the rhythm of those repeating cycles can be used to denote the passage of time. That's like straight from the dictionary. Tick-tock, tick-tock, tick-tock.
A clock is not something that creates time. A clock only records the passage of time.
So the cosmic clock that God uses to relate his time of creation to man is what?
The answer is simply light. Light is the only constant in the universe. It provides a method of measuring the passage of time in the cosmos.
Light can be used as a cosmic clock to measure the passage of time by any change in the wavelength or cycle or frequency of light.
The distances between the crests of the light wave.
Ding! That's right.
We'll skip all the math involved.
I mean, you'd like us to. I mean, I'd be happy to go through the detail.
No, we're good.
Okay, then let's just say that science has proven this by measuring the stretching of the wavelength of the light from the sun compared to the wavelength or frequency of the same light created on Earth.
The results confirm the predictions made by Einstein and by the theory of time dilation.
In order to compare time today with time at the Big Bang,
And the passage of time between then and now,
there has to be a source of light which exists today that also existed at the time of the Big Bang.
This light source was found in 1964 by accident when two astronomers discovered what's called cosmic background radiation, or CBR.
This is a residual radiation left over from the time of the Big Bang.
and it fills all space today as it did then.
The property of the CBR, which make it the perfect cosmic clock, is the change that has occurred in the wavelength of the decaying ash between the moment when matter first was formed following the Big Bang and now.
At that Big Bang moment, the temperature in that initial plasma mass was nearly 11 trillion degrees, and the frequency of what is now CBR corresponded.
The original frequency of the CBR was some 3 trillion cycles per second.
As the universe cooled and expanded, space stretched, and with it, the wavelength of the CBR.
Today, that CBR is cooled to only 2.73 degrees Kelvin, and the wavelength to some 3 cycles per second.
The ticking of this cosmic clock has slowed from 3 trillion cycles per second to 3 cycles per second. The stretching of space and time as the universe has expanded, in turn, stretched the distance between the wave crests of the CBR.
The passage of time just after the Big Bang occurred at a rate 1 trillion times faster than it does today.
So God telling the story of the first 6 days to Moses, he was telling it from his frame of reference.
He told it based on the passage of time reflected by the cosmic clock.
God related to Moses what happened on each of the 6 days of Genesis based on the passage of time as kept by the cosmic clock as it recorded the passage of time as it occurred.
There's a simple formula which can be used to break the rate of change in the passage of cosmic time down into steps.
But in doing this rate of change, the amount of time passing will be seen from our local frame of reference, our perspective, here on Earth today, in the future.
Yes, we will be looking back in time, measuring time by our clocks today.
Our clocks that run 1 trillion times slower than the cosmic clock just after the Big Bang.
Yeah, exactly!
With every doubling in the size of the universe from the instant of the Big Bang until the time of Adam, the stretching of the wavelength of the CBR reflects a slowing of the passage of time by 1/2.
Obviously, each doubling in the size of the universe takes longer than the previous doubling. Each doubling expansion has twice as far to go.
Whatever that means.
Now, we are going to break this universe expansion up into 6 steps.
We are calling these steps pots.
It's a term we coined meaning passages of time.
Each pot reflects the passage of time from the Big Bang to now, with each of the 6 doublings in the size of the universe and 1 trillion times stretching in the size of the universe. The first of these 6 pots, looking back and based on our time today, would reflect the passage of 8 billion years.
Let's assume Paddington was there right after the Big Bang and saw the events of the first pot as they occurred. All of that information would be wrapped up inside the coils of this slinky. The universe expands. Space and time stretch 1 trillion times. The extended distance between the coils of this slinky indicating that stretch.
And now Paddington comes up and tells Albert about the events of that first pot.
He describes these events as they took place in their original time frame, one day. But as Albert looks back, he sees those events from the perspective of today's clock, a clock that runs 1 trillion times slower than the original cosmic clock used by Paddington. He sees these events unfolding with the passage of 8 billion years, which reflects the stretching of space and time.
With an adjustment in the logarithmic scale, the second of the pots would reflect the passage of 4 billion years.
And then 2 billion and 1 billion and so on.
Add up the length of time reflected by these 6 pots as seen from our current perspective, and you have 15.75 billion years as the age of our universe, or 6 days as measured by the cosmic clock.
And this is a scientific observation based on proven science reflecting the same period of time as it occurred in the 2 different frames of reference. The time as it unfolded based on the cosmic clock, and the amount of time as measured by today's clocks, measured by today's time computation.
What God described to Moses and what Moses described to the next person using the passage of time are from different frames of reference, different perspective.
God telling Moses the story of the 6 days of Genesis is like Captain Chen relating the events of her 1-hour survey at the edge of the black hole to people whose clocks had marked the passage of thousands of years during the same 1-hour period.
And you might just find this to be an interesting quirk, except for one thing.
Let's look at what science says actually happened during each of these pots and compare them to the 6 days of Genesis.
Dad, if you could summarize for us the first day of Genesis.
In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And the earth was without form and was void. And the darkness was over the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God hovered over the surface of the waters. And God said, "Let there be light."
Are there some points that need to be clarified?
Yeah, 3 really. You need to understand something of Hebrew to understand the book of Genesis. First of all, in the ancient Hebrew language, there is no word for universe. Secondly, the waters are really representing everything that there was. And darkness is a symbol for a state of chaos.
Dr. Tolley, day 1 would have started 15.75 billion years ago and ended 7.75 billion years ago. What does science say happened on Earth during this time period?
At the instant of the Big Bang, everything that would ever be, everything that would constitute the quarks, protons, neutrons, electrons, from which everything that now exists, as well as time and space itself, were created. The Earth only existed in the form of stardust that would later congeal into the planet. As to the verse, "Let there be light," you need to go back to your Big Bang video and correct something. The name Big Bang conjures up the impression of this brilliant explosion and flash of light, like an atomic bomb. That's how this event is generally pictured, but it's not accurate. From the initial moment of creation, and as the universe initially expanded, it was a ball of plasma of such incredible heat and density and gravitational forces that no light could have escaped. Initially, there was no light at all, just a swirling opaque mass of pure energy. It was only when this primordial primal mass had cooled and expanded to a point where the gravitational forces were reduced enough to permit electromagnetic radiation to escape that there would have been light.
So, let there be light is clearly a separate event from the initial creation in both the Bible and science?
Yes. And during the remainder of that first 8 billion year period, the early stars and galaxies formed.
Dad, day 2.
Day 2, the heavens as we know them were created, and the chaos that would eventually become the earth was separated from the rest of creation.
Dr. Tolley, Cosmic Clock Day 2, what happened during this time period?
Our own galaxy, the Milky Way, formed, as did our sun and planet Earth in its earliest carnation.
Daddy, day 3.
The oceans and the dry land appeared, as well as the first forms of plant life.
Professor Campbell, we're in your arena now. What does science say happened on Earth between 3.75 billion years ago and 1.75 billion years ago?
Well, some 3.8 billion years ago, the Earth cooled, liquid water formed. Almost immediately, first plant and animal life, photosynthetic algae, bacteria appeared.
Back to you, Dad. Day 4.
Day 4, the sun, the moon, and the stars appeared.
Same time period, Professor. 1.75 billion years ago and 750 million years ago.
Well, initially, in the first part of this period, atmosphere on Earth would have been nearly opaque. Then with the rising concentrations of oxygen, the atmosphere would have become translucent. And then the sun, the moon, and the stars would have appeared for the first time from the surface of the earth.
Dad, day 5.
Day 5, life is created in the oceans and the first reptiles and birds.
Professor, 750 million to 250 million.
Well, initially, sea life would have been dominant, and then came the Cambrian era. Cambrian explosion about 530 million years ago, when every species of land animal literally appeared at the same time.
So instead of a tree of life, it was more like a bush of life.
Touche, Carrie.
And the Bible in day 6?
Day 6, the land animals become dominant, and God created man in his own image.
250 million years ago into the appearance of Adam.
Well, 250 million years ago, there was a mass extinction. 90% of the life on Earth, followed by a rapid repopulation, mammals, land animals predominating, and...
That was the Permian-Triassic event. Depending on how you define them, there have been between 5 and 20 ELLIs, or extinction-level events.
Like in the Tia Leone Morgan Freeman movie, Deep Impact.
But I didn't think that was a real thing. That's a movie thing, right?
No, that happens.
Anyway, about 35 million years later, around 250 million years ago, the dinosaurs appeared and dominated life on Earth for about 150 million years. Then, 65 million years ago, another ELLI, this one known as the KT extinction, killed off the dinosaurs and opened the way for mammals and birds to become the dominant land animals.
then the first hominids.
And finally, human beings as we know them today appeared. Now, isn't it true that at the time Genesis was written, there was no awareness of any of the scientific stages that you and Dr. Charlie described?
Well, at that time, Carrie, most people thought the Earth was flat.
Today, the cosmic clock continues to tick, to measure the passage of time at the level of the cosmos. And as the universe continues to expand, the rate at which it measures time continues to slow.
But that doesn't mean anything to us now. From the moment God breathed the neshama of life into Adam, when God gave man his soul, we on Earth have denoted the passage of time by our Earth-based clocks.
Where 1 second is part of 1 day, which reflects the rotation of the Earth on its axis, and a year that marks the completion of 1 Earth circuit of the sun.
You said God told the story of Genesis to Moses, or that it was written down by others inspired by the word of God, but what if there just isn't any God?
The idea that Moses or anyone else at the time Genesis was written, a time that Bob reminded us just a minute ago, when most people believed that the world was flat, could have created a story that so perfectly reflects what science has now proven to be true, all on its secular own. To believe that, for me anyway, is harder than to believe in God.
But isn't that the same thing as the old day-age argument?
No, not really. The day-age or concordist interpretation is an attempt to rationalize the Genesis story and reinterpret the words that the original authors used when they presented the 6 days of creation.
There is no science to back that up. I mean, what we are talking about here today is a result of applying proven science to the issue.
This is a scientifically derived answer to the question with no spin or subjective interpretation. So you see, science and its 15.75 billion years and the 6 days of Genesis are in complete accord. Science has proven what religious leaders have been unable to prove for thousands of years.
Spoken like the scientist you are, Mark.
But in reality, science has just caught up with the truth of the Bible. Science has simply deciphered the Genesis code.
I think what I find most amazing about this is the uncanny brilliance of biblical Genesis, which is presented to us in such a way that